Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.
First, it was R. Kelly, then Diddy, now Epstein. We can no longer bury our heads in the sand when it comes to human trafficking and exploitation, especially since it's right in our backyard, not just on some remote island or hotel room. How do we keep ourselves and our children safe? Listen to find out. Safety isn't a luxury, it's a strategy. Welcome to Prepping for Urban Ladies, where I empower the modern woman to take command over her future. I'm Lynn Jordan, the Urban Lady Prepper. From solo apartment living to managing a household in a crisis, I provide the roadmap for practical, urban-focused emergency preparedness. While I specialize in a female perspective, the mission is universal: total preparedness for everyone. Let's dive in. In August 2024, I published a blog that I thought told the whole story about human trafficking. It was the result of weeks of research, and it briefly laid bare a world of horror that most of us prefer to believe exists only in the shadows, far from our own lives. I wrote about its heinous nature, its hidden tactics, and its shocking prevalence. It was difficult to keep the article within certain length parameters, but I thought I had brought the entire dark reality to light. While my reach isn't very broad yet, I was proud of the awareness it raised, but I was also deeply, profoundly wrong. The story wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. Right now, in prison, one R&B star and one rap legend sit for their role in human trafficking, sexual abuse, and exploitation. Now, a certain set of files is making headlines around the world involving the impossibly rich, royalty, and allegedly the highest office in my country. People messaged me privately with even more information I wasn't aware of. So it was time to revisit the subject as it was more relevant than ever. And even more important for people to understand that this is not something that exists only in exclusive parties or on an island frequented by evil people, but an industry that feeds on people much closer to home, and the victims aren't always who you'd expect. I've spent the last few weeks digging into the latest reports, and the data from 2025 reveals a reality that is far more widespread and far more terrifying than what I wrote about in 2024. We're seeing alarming reports from the front lines of a spiraling crisis. But it's not just the scale that's shocking, it's the story behind the numbers. It's who these new victims are, how they are being targeted, and how their stories prove that the danger is closer, quieter, and more invasive than we ever dared to imagine. This is the updated story. When I wrote my article in 2024, my goal was to shatter the old myths. I wanted to move our collective understanding beyond the stereotype of young women being physically kidnapped and smuggled across a border or offered for rent on online marketplaces. I explained, as many advocates have for years, that trafficking is a crime of psychological warfare. It's about exploiting vulnerability, whether that's a need for love, a search for a better job, or the instability in a young person's life. My whole point was that trafficking is hidden in plain sight and that no demographic is safe. I wrote about how victims aren't always children or women who fit a certain type. I also advised that traffickers don't always look like monsters. They can look like mentors or legitimate-seeming employers. But as we're increasingly realizing, or maybe finally acknowledging, that they can also be boyfriends, friends, and even worse, relatives. They're masters of the long game of grooming and manipulation, building trust before they weaponize it. And that message started to land. The idea that this was happening in our own cities, to our own neighbors, started to sink in. We started to understand that victims weren't just runaways or from visibly broken homes. They were students, athletes, kids from two-parent households, people looking for work on what seemed like legitimate websites. That was the reality I presented, and at the time, it felt like the complete picture. We believed we finally understood the shape of the monster, but what we didn't see was how fast that monster was evolving. We were looking at the battlefield, but we've all failed to pay enough attention to the new weapons being deployed. While we were focused on the traps being set in the physical world, and my article and plenty of TikTok videos demonstrate things to look out for, the front line of this war had already moved online, and it was expanding at a speed we were completely unprepared for. For my audience of primarily single moms and solo women, it is so important that we recognize the depth of the threat and be hyper-vigilant, especially if we have children. The biggest issue, and the biggest threat now, is technology. The alarming trends we're seeing are a symptom of a much larger national crisis that has exploded in the last year, fueled primarily by the internet. What I've learned from the 2025 data is nothing short of a paradigm shift. According to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, NCMEC, the first 6 months of 2025 saw reports of the online enticement of children jump by 77% compared to the first half of 2024. That's a leap from around 293,000 reports to nearly 519,000 in just 1 year. And this next statistic should stop you in your tracks. In that same 6-month window, reports of actual child sex trafficking made to NCMEC's cyber tip line saw an almost 10-fold increase from just under 6,000 to over 62,000. Again, from just under 6,000 to over 62,000. Now, authorities note that part of the staggering spike stems from a new law, the Report Act, which expanded mandatory reporting requirements for tech companies. And that's a good thing. It means we're getting a clearer picture. But what we can't allow that context to numb us to the reality. Every single one of those reports, whether new or newly visible, represents a child experiencing unthinkable harm. The darkness wasn't just growing. Our ability to see it was finally catching up, and its scale is breathtaking. The very nature of recruitment has been transformed. An organization working on the front lines, the Exodus Road, stated in its 2025 report that 2/3 of the trafficking cases they investigated involved online recruitment. The process of grooming, which used to take months of in-person interaction, can now be compressed into days or weeks through the intimacy of a direct message. This creates a new face of danger. This digital explosion changes everything. It changes who's vulnerable, how they're targeted, and who the traffickers are. This is the part of the story that proves the danger is closer than ever, because the point of entry is already in our homes. It's in our pockets and in our children's hands. The new weapons are social media, gaming platforms, and messaging apps. And now, traffickers have a terrifying new tool, generative artificial intelligence, AI. In the first half of 2025, NCMEC saw reports of AI being used in child exploitation skyrocket from just under 7,000 to over 440,000. Predators no longer need to convince a child to produce an explicit image. They can create one themselves from a photo on a social media profile and then use that deepfake for blackmail and extortion. The threat is no longer just about convincing someone to do something. It's about what can be done to their very image without their consent. While folks are pushing for laws to prevent this, AI is moving faster than it can be regulated. This new reality also forces us to update our profile of a victim. While human trafficking affects people of all genders and ages, data from the front lines serves as a stark warning about the assault on our youth. Equally, we must abandon the outdated image of the trafficker. The stereotype of a shadowy man in a van is not only obsolete, but also dangerous because it blinds us to the real threat. The Exodus Road's 2025 report found that nearly 40% of the traffickers arrested in their cases were women. As we navigate the most recent headlines about trafficking, the one and only person paying for their role in the extensive exploitation is a woman. Traffickers are intimate partners, online friends, and sometimes even family members. They exploit a need for love, for belonging, money, or acceptance. They find a vulnerability and patiently and expertly twist it into a cage. The face of the trafficker today is often a familiar one, which is the most chilling part of all. So, with this crisis escalating at an exponential rate, how is our system responding? The U.S. State Department's 2025 Trafficking in Persons report offers a sobering answer. On the surface, there is some good news. The United States continues to meet the minimum standards for the elimination of trafficking, maintaining its Tier 1 ranking. Efforts are being made, and investigations into sex trafficking have increased. But if you read between the lines, the report tells a story of a system cracking under the pressure. It clearly states that support for victim services remain inadequate, as did the availability of affordable, safe, and stable housing options for survivors. We are identifying more victims than ever before, but we're failing to provide them with the fundamental resources they need to heal and rebuild their lives. Even more disturbingly, the report highlights that in some cases, victims continue to be arrested for unlawful acts they were forced to commit as a direct result of being trafficked. Imagine escaping years of brutal exploitation only to be branded a criminal by the very system that was supposed to protect you. This creates a permanent record that becomes a barrier to employment, to housing, to education, essentially a barrier to a future. It is a profound injustice, a second betrayal that traps survivors in a cycle of trauma and instability. Our laws may be improving, but our implementation and support systems are lagging dangerously behind the scale of the crisis. And as we're witnessing firsthand, we're apt to protect the perpetrators than the victims. We're pulling more people from the fire, but we have nowhere to put them, and we're sometimes punishing them for having been burned. So, where does that leave us? I started this journey sharing what I thought was relevant in 2024, but the reality of 2025 and beyond is a clear, undeniable warning. The nature of this crime has fundamentally shifted. The front line is no longer on a street corner or in a van. It's on a screen. The danger is not a stranger lurking in the shadows. It's a notification on a phone. While some of the headlines we've been reading over the last couple of years have been horrifying, the one positive thing we could take from it is that it's making us face the reality of just how prevalent this is, how extensive its reach is, and how lucrative it can be for the perpetrators, as it is devastating for its victims. This is not a problem for someone else to solve. It is here, now, and we all have a role to play. First, we have to update our own understanding and the understanding of those around us. The most important thing you can do today is share the story. Talk about it. The trafficker isn't just a character in a movie. It's an online profile that seems too good to be true, a job offer that comes at just the right time that isolates someone from their support system. It's the person who showers a vulnerable youth with attention and gifts. Awareness is our first line of defense. Second, learn the real signs of online grooming and digital manipulation. Have honest, open conversations with the young people in your life about the risks they face online, not to scare them, but to empower them. And don't believe that you can't be a victim yourself. Human trafficking isn't always sexual. It's also used for slave labor. And if you thought this is something that existed in other areas of the world, understand that it's happening here, and that for those roles, you don't have to be a young, beautiful girl or boy to be a target. If you suspect something is wrong, please report it. The National Human Trafficking Hotline is a confidential resource available 24/7. The number is 888-373-7888. That's 888-373-7888. You can also text them at 233-733. That's 233-733. Your call or text could be the lifeline someone is desperately praying for. My blog on human trafficking was just the beginning. I thought I was exposing an understanding of a story, but I realize now I was only writing the prologue. The new chapters are being written right now in real time, in our headlines, through encrypted apps, in private messages, and in the bedrooms of our children. The story is darker and more complex than I ever knew. And even this episode leaves more questions than answers, which, if you follow me, is not how I like to leave things. But here we are. I would be doing you a disservice if I didn't address the issues that don't always have a simple solution. The ending, the final chapter, has not yet been written, and it depends entirely on what we do next. I hope that as a community, especially among women, we find a way to stay safe and protected and help each other to do so as well. Thanks for listening. Until next time, this is the Urban Lady Prepper signing off.
Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.